Good evening and welcome to Roundtable. Today we have with us Mr. Uchita De Zoysa. He is the chairman of the Global Sustainability Solutions Movement, and also he has published recently this book. It says it has to be climate sustainability. So this book was recently launched at the Copenhagen Climate Summit, and there was a very interesting line I picked on to start the discussion with. It says that you are promising everybody who was reading the book that you were going to be dressed in a bottle at the next environmental summit. Mr. De Zoysa, so good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening.
And what does that line say, that you are going to be dressed in a bottle?
Basically, there's what is called rPET or recycled PET garments. Now, this means that all the water bottles that we consume made out of plastic are recycled and made into good fiber, and out of the fiber there's textiles made, and textiles are turned into garments. This is very new in the world. Taiwanese colleague, friend of mine, brought some samples, and one of the things talking about the climate issues and the recycling, which is one of the issues that we will talk about, is that, you know, I promised that I will wear a recycled garment, and my mother designed a jacket for me, and I was dressed in a bottle. It started with a bottle.
So this was at the recent Copenhagen
Climate Summit in Copenhagen in December.
Right. So that is how you were dressed in a bottle, because I was quite intrigued. I was wondering how can basically a person be dressed in a bottle. So Mr. De Zoysa, do introduce us to you to ourselves. Like, there is a very interesting activist in you, starting as a journalist, investigative journalist in environment, up to the point where you become the chairman of the Global Sustainability Solutions. So how did it all begin?
So it's a 20-year ride down the memory line. I started just after school as a journalist, and very fast into the profession realized that there are issues that are threatening human beings and the environment, and became probably one of the first environmental journalists in this country, and wrote the first ever global environmental column in Sinhala in this country. Since then, my journalism took me towards activism, meeting a lot of people in the civil society, and I was not very happy with the divisions and the limitations of what was happening in the organizational context, and went on to create a large coalition of environmental and social justice groups in this country. It led to we brought in about 10 large groups, plus about another 500-600 groups from all over. And my first assignment was to investigate and write the first People's Citizens Report in this country and present it to the Earth Summit on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. That is where I started my sustainability campaigner's life.
Right. So now you were mentioning the 1992 summit. So we know that when it comes to environment and all that, there are so many summits that they've been convening, the latest being the Copenhagen Climate Summit. So actually, Mr. De Zoysa, what has been the challenge? Is there a challenge, actually, the climate change challenge? What it is? What is it? Can you explain to us what that is?
Look, currently, what scientists are saying on Earth is that the Earth is warming induced by human activity. Now, this means that our actions in producing and consuming goods and living lifestyles that are not supplementary to the environment or not complementary to the environment has triggered a global temperature to rise, and thus climate change to happen. The challenge is, what, as they say, as the scientists say, is enormous. What they are saying is that if a global temperature starts rising above a 2 centigrade, human habitation on Earth will be very hard, anything above 2 centigrade. And what they are saying is the current trends are taking us way above the 2 centigrade and could even reach a 4 centigrade point in around 2050 on Earth. Then it's going to be extremely hard to live on Earth because humans are used to a certain temperature, and not only it's the warmth, it's the changes that will happen in the entire ecosystem and the Earth's. That means while the Earth's surface starts heating up, the oceans will start heating up, the sea levels will rise, agricultural lands will be impacted on land, then the food supply chain will be threatened. There will be a lot of earthquakes, earth slips, floods happening all over, just like we are seeing now.
So basically that is the threat that is posed basically as climate change, is it? But my question to you, Mr. De Zoysa, is like you said that this is human induced. So are you saying that people in the developing countries and the developed countries are equally stakeholders in getting the world to where we are now? Are we all responsible in coming to this particular crucial standpoint?
Look, the responsibility is not equal at the moment. If you look at who created this situation on Earth. Now, one is, if it is man-made or man-induced condition on Earth, then we have to go back into the history and look at who were the greater contributors. Now, in generic terms, we say that 20% of global population consumes 80% of the resources, while the rest of the 80% gets a bare 20%. But the actual truth is, if you look at the bottom or the lowest category of 20% of consumers on Earth, they get about 1.5% of global resources. Now, this 20% or more or less categorized as the Western countries or the developed countries, that would mean Europe, the Americans, Australians. Their impact in an industrialized, post-industrialized world towards running towards huge consumerist societal development has created a lot of impact on the climate, on the atmosphere. That means that, you know, all the industries and the fossil fuel burning, the energy burning, which has emitted lots of carbon dioxide, has created this global warming situation, which is transforming into a larger climate change problem.
So in that context, now that is what we were speaking about, the activities of the developed countries and the post-developed era. So now developing countries, they want to come up with their own development projects, right? So they also do have a right to development, but now they are penalized and they are asked to sort of look at environmental implications. So this is a very popular debate, if I'm not wrong, Mr. De Zoysa, that in the environment debates with respect to environment. So where can one draw the right to development debate? How can you bring that in? And is the developing countries, just because we did not have the right to do it at that time, can we not go into development right now?
Look, this is the whole impasse, the climate impasse between the developed and developing countries that is happening around the climate negotiations. The developing countries claim that the responsible or the major lion's share of the responsibility should be taken by the developed countries, and that in the process of change on Earth, the developing countries need to be supported to achieve certain levels of development, or in other words, well-being, achieving levels of well-being where the Western world or the developed countries have achieved. Now, this debate is a very, very deep debate. Now, if you look at, if you recall the Kyoto Protocol problem, and what is being told by the developed countries is that the Kyoto Protocol is going to cease or come to an end by 2012. Now, we are just 2 years down the line for this, and there's no agreement. From the beginning, the United States of America as a government did not endorse or sign on to the Kyoto Protocol. That was the beginning of a huge problem within the climate negotiations. Then if you take the group of